Hi everyone, and welcome to session 2 of What to Do About Anger. Last session we talked about buttons and triggers and my version of what buttons and triggers were, and just as a reminder, buttons are created by personal experiences and are determined by the degree to which these issues are still causing emotional pain. So I was looking at what was that emotional pain and how do we experience it, and triggers are created by environmental experiences of which the person had no control. And I provided an example of that. I think the other thing too that we need to note is that there are destructive ways of expressing our anger, and we need to be able to identify what those particular ways are. And this is what we're going to do in this session. So we're going to have a look at what are the destructive ways. I've talked about what are positive ways by which you could view anger and how that could best be expressed and amplified in our own lives. But this time we're going to talk about just briefly about destructive ways by which we would experience anger. And the first of those is that the thing that most of us tend to do, which is simply want to blame others for what's happening to us. And this is, I find, working with people that are angry is problematic in many ways, because when you're blaming somebody else, you're simply not taking responsibility for what's happening. Now, one of the most important things to remember is that often men will tend to say, or people will tend to say, not just men, that what they're doing is not harming somebody else. Now, sometimes we can just harm somebody in the most subtle ways, and if we continue to do that over time, it amplifies, and eventually somebody will feel either interrogated or feel that behaviour is destructive to them in some way. So what I suggest we do is that we remember that it is not the message given that's important, it's the message that's received. So we might think that we're doing okay in terms of what we're saying and doing, but we might be doing it in a way which is making the other person feel uncomfortable. And we need to understand that the way we perceive it is not necessarily the way that others may receive it. Being aggressive clearly is unhelpful. Interrogation, now that is, where have you been, what have you been doing, who have you been calling, who have you been contacting, who are you speaking to on social media. It's a way by which we attack somebody by interrogating them with a series of ridiculous and often stupid questions. And we might think we're just trying to find out information about what's been happening, but in actual fact, the other person just feels so interrogated by it. Now, sometimes we can do that quite innocently, but we need to think that, what are attacking questions and what are explorative type questions? What are we asking that is just a general question, as opposed to what is about focusing on the thing that we want? And sometimes it's about us being frustrated because we're not getting the response that we want. We need to have a certain response. We're not getting it. So the question we need to be asking is, why do we need to have that response in the first place? What's that all about? Sarcasm, ridicule, cynicism. So being, sometimes some of us just are sarcastic people, I guess. But and we think that sarcasm is kind of fun, or making fun of other people, ridiculing them, is also fun. But it can be demeaning, and it can encourage those people to become further and further separated from us, because they're feeling supported. They're feeling unsupported, rather, by the sorts of comments that we're making. Sometimes we just become vicious and attacking, like an attack dog. And clearly that is unhelpful. Vindictiveness, so we're looking for ways to further attack them, becoming really focused on the things that we think should be done, criticising other people, wanting to hurt them in some particular way through the way we speak and sometimes the way we behave. Criticism, continue criticising someone, criticising someone for their body shape, criticising someone for the way they talk, for some of their behaviours is really unhelpful. And sadism, which is really hurting people for the sake of wanting to hurt them. The other one down there, which you can't see because I'm in the way, is violence. Now, the important thing to be aware of is all those things that we know just are unhelpful. It's a no-brainer, really. And then to focus on being aware of what happens to us when we're starting to get worked up about something. So what are we noticing that might be happening? Now, there are always early warning signs. Regardless of what you say or what you think, I can assure you there are always early warning signs. This includes any changes in your body, your thoughts, and your behaviour that indicate anger. And particularly that indicates to you that you're about to get angry, that something happens to you prior to those moments where you explode, and that you need to be able to find a way to address that before it actually happens. It also includes knowing your emotional buttons and triggers, which we've talked about. If you are aware of these early warning signs, you can be more prepared to respond appropriately. So I'm just going to talk about those for a moment. Now, a lot of people will say that they don't have an early warning sign, that they just explode. I can remember working with a guy many years ago now who stated that I just have a rage and I black out and I have no awareness of what's happening around me and I just lose it. But he said to me, there's no early warning sign. So what do I do if I don't notice an early warning sign? And we went through what actually happened to him. And he said that he would just black out and then he'd sort of come to and there'd be all these bodies scattered all over the place because he beat the crap out of them. And then we started going through it though in increments and asked what happens before, what sort of things did he recognise were happening to his body, which is something he had never really thought about. He just thought he'd blacked out. Now, as he's reflecting on it, he came to the conclusion that there was a sensation that occurred before he blacked out. And that was that he noticed that it was almost like the blood was rising through his body from his ankles right up through his body. He could feel this intensity happening. And then by the time it got up halfway across his face, it was then that he blacked out. Now, he came to realise at that point that if he was aware of that early warning sign, then he could possibly deal with the problem. But if he was unaware, if he just wasn't cognitive of the fact that this is what happened to him, of course it appeared that he just blacked out. So once he became aware of that, he was able to understand that he was able to do something about it. So understanding what our early warning signs are is imperative in terms of understanding that we can control it. There is something we can do, and the decisions that we make can be made at a point whereby we're not exploding, we're not damaging other people. We can make decisions to walk away, to do other things that are going to be less harmful to people in general. So the next thing I want to talk about is owning and taking responsibility for it. So when we are angry, we often want to give away this feeling like it's a hot potato. We just want to get rid of it as best as we can. We do this if we have the belief that other people make us angry. And I think this is a really important concept. Other people in and of themselves don't make us angry. We think they do because other people do and say things that we believe cause us to be angry. Now, if we're going to continually blame them for our anger, then there's no way in the world we're going to be able to resolve that issue personally, because we're not taking responsibility for it. So we need to take responsibility for our anger. We need to take responsibility just generally for how we feel. So other people do not make us angry. We blame others for our feelings, which implies that until they change or do something, there is nothing we can do. And that's just what I was saying, basically. That until we decide that this is our issue and we own that issue, then nothing is likely to change. So when we use I statements, we are owning our feelings and can then take responsibility for doing something about it. So when we make statements that are about you, we're clearly attacking that person with that statement. But when we say, I am responsible for what's happening, I behaved badly, I should not have done whatever it was that you've done, then you are taking responsibility, as opposed to saying, when you talk to me in a certain way, like when you yell at me, when you whatever, that once we say that, we're blaming them for how we're feeling rather than taking responsibility for how we feel, then we're not assisting the situation one iota. So when you don't acknowledge your anger, it does not go away. It comes out in other ways and affects ourselves and the types of relationships that we want. Remember, acknowledging anger does not mean acting out aggressively. Far from it. If we acknowledge our anger and we recognize where it's coming from, it gives us the power and authority to be able to manage the behavior that sits around that anger. You could acknowledge it simply by being aware, for example, thinking, I'm feeling really hot and angry here, or I'm noticing that my blood pressure is increasing, or my heart is racing, or I'm having these particular sorts of thoughts right now, right? And so how am I going to respond? Now that I'm feeling like this, how am I going to respond around it that is going to ensure that the other person is safe? This way you're acknowledging and accepting what you feel and deciding, giving self choices and how to respond. And this is key, that there comes a moment where we can accept what's happening for us and that we can do something to ensure that the other people in our world are safe. Understand that you have a choice in how you respond, express your anger, and I can't stress this enough. This is your choice. So if you feel attacked, or you feel you're not listened to, or whatever it might be, the way you choose to respond around that is entirely up to you. No one makes you clench your fist. No one makes you raise your voice. You choose to do all of those things. No one tells you need to be sarcastic, or you need to put somebody down, or you need to be negative about somebody. You make the choice about whether or not this is the way you want to be. And as a result of those choices, you will choose to behave either badly and affect and impact other people, or you might make other choices choices which are about expressing how you're feeling, but in ways which are not harmful of others. So when you own your anger, you are taking responsibility for this emotion. And this is critical. And I'm going to go into this in greater detail later, but we don't talk about our emotions enough. We don't understand where our emotions come from, why they're there, and so on. But if we can understand that we have them to start with, and that we can utilize our understandings around these emotions in a way that's productive, then we can probably make some choices that are about expressing who you are in ways which are more acceptable to other people. And we need to find ways to be able to do that so that we're not harming those people whom we generally care about the most, including the most familial persons in our lives, our partners, our children, and others. So this is a way by which we can make choices which are going to be inclusive of others. So we need to assess our level of anger and our ability to manage it. Now, firstly, we need to say that we all can manage our anger, no matter how bad or how destructive it may appear to be from time to time. So can you manage this emotion without losing control and blaming the other person? Of course you can. These are questions you need to be asking yourselves. Do you need to give yourself time to calm down? Well, yes, most of us do. We need to have some time out so that we can decide what the next action will be that is going to be respectful of the other person. Are you able to deal with the situation constructively, or would time out be helpful? So we need to develop the appropriate skills to manage it. So are you stuck in old patterns of reacting? And sometimes, frankly, those old patterns come from the people that we've grown up with, maybe our parents and other people that have been significant in our lives. So certainly, do you need to develop better ways to manage yourself? Yeah, probably do, such as time out, which we're going to be talking about. Assertion, which we're also going to be talking about. Managing our self-talk, relaxation, building your self-esteem so that you can feel better about who you are will certainly mean that you can respond differently to those people around us. Anger is energy. It is. It's a great deal of energy that builds up into us over time. So we can do constructive things to get rid of your energy. Now, this will vary for everybody. You need to choose one which perhaps fits with you. So, for example, you can do some physical exercise, go for a run. One of the things I enjoy doing is playing golf. So have a round of golf or do something that you enjoy doing that is physical. So you can talk it out using positive statements. So you can have discussions with people. And this is what I think is probably the best way, but it's a skill that takes a lot of dedication and a lot of learning. And we're going to have conversations about I statements later. Writing out how you feel. So you can write down statements about what's happening to you and your list of emotions, and I'll be talking about that later on in our course. Or do activities that help burn up, expend energy, the garden, stuff around the home, vacuum the house. Do stuff that you think is going to be helpful to you so that you can deal with this differently. Now, other important qualities. Now, these are when we say humour here, we don't mean sarcasm. We mean having fun. And even though here we've got, I didn't write this statement up, but they say forgiveness. Now, I think forgiveness is often overrated, so I'm not going to highlight too much on forgiveness. But I think we do need to find ways to let go of any hurt or pain that we've had. And sometimes letting go is a long process. It's not going to happen overnight, but it is a therapeutic process that we need to find our way through, particularly where someone has hurt us over and over again, and that expresses itself in our anger. Often not the person that we're angry at, it's usually someone else in our lives, but our anger is expressed at the person that we care the most about in that given moment. Being prepared to listen and understand the other person's point of view is integral, and I must say that in terms of relationships, that is probably one of the biggest issues that gets in the way. One of the biggest barriers is finding ways to simply listen to somebody. Recognise that there are always two sides or more to a situation, and admit when you've made mistakes or you're stuffed up. The problem with admitting that you're stuffed up or saying that you're sorry, and there's a difference, is that when you say you're sorry and you do that every time you stuff up or make the same mistake or say the same thing or act badly, then the sorry means less and less over time. So we need to make sure that if we're stuffing up, we're admitting to what that behaviour was. So much in this anger stuff which we could deal with. So at the moment, we've talked about acknowledging that how we're feeling, to talk about the early warning signs, the things that come up that may cause us to be aware that we have this particular issue, and then to put what I call a gap between how I'm thinking and feeling and the physiological impact that it has, and compare that with how much time do I have to think about, what space can I put in there to allow me to think about all those other things, and the choices that I now make in terms of how I'm likely to behave in the future. So we can make choices, take responsibility for what's happening to us, and act differently so that we're not harming others. So thanks everybody for being with me in session 2. Session 3 will probably be up pretty shortly in the next few days. Follow this all the way through. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and make sure that you subscribe and ring the bell for further notifications. Thanks everybody. Take care. Look after yourselves, and make sure that everybody around you is safe.